once again, a preponderance of information, and before I forget too much of it, I'm going to go through it as far as I've gotten so far, and I'll give you another warning. Nothing on the exterior. This is all interior stuff for you guys to consider and decide upon, so that these final plans, whatever they are as complete and easy to follow as possible. First, this is where we about ended the last film, except this square footage hadn't been updated because of that there. And that was the various rooms that needed updated. And once they're updated, that's how the figures change. So that was 1724. This was not 1629, but these are the individual, the way those changed. The great room gained 25, kitchen gained, dining room went up by 50, so all that square footage got divided out like that. So I began a couple of days ago, renamed this 514 going forward, and I promised you these would be in no particular order, or maybe I didn't. But first I looked at these, apparently I looked at the laundry room first, and I did find out that stainless steel is going to be your bet in there because of the moisture. And for the cost, this 1 5/16, not polished chrome but stainless, this is a good price. I don't know what the delivery is, but I would shop that locally or whatever. But that's what I did with that research, just to know. And then you had talked about an 18-inch deep shelf running around the top of the room, and then a rod over here. And these rods almost always, all these brackets are, based upon this 12-inch shelf above. So this was, that is how these rods are generally treated, and that's how I've treated it. And I'm actually working back and forth between the program and this as I go, so you never know what you'll end up with in the duration of this. First of all, I took away those seats at the island, and again, I'm trying to remember where I was with this. And I brought that wall forward. I moved the electric panel down to the hall. There'll be more to say on that. But coming in here closer, apparently, I moved the stairs and the door in the garage a little bit further that way to end up with 21 inches from the casing to the wall right here. And then in the mechanical room with the water heater, I've done this for now, and that's so flexible that can be framed as needed in that little area. I took out the urinal, and I took out the door to the toilet room, and then I just took out the doorway as well because there was really no need for that. And I guess maybe use a little seat back here, because that's, once the urinal's gone, this whole thing could be a big, huge shower if that's what a person wanted. And even like this can always be renovated that way down the road if that's what a person would want. Next though, I worked on this coffee bar area, apparently. Switched it over like this. Got rid of this in front of the chimney and moved it over in here. Now we have 4-2 there. So I use a little bit of that, pull a little bit of that. This is the island, and this is a wall cabinet underneath to occupy that little cutout. Remember, there's a double recycle bin facing that way and a 33-inch base facing this way, so there's this hollow spot here, so that can get a little wall cabinet that's put up so it has kind of a toe kick, and that's underneath, just something that you can get to for longer term storage. And I'm definitely going to have trouble remembering things because I've been involved in so many different things with regard to this. But it looks like then I zoomed out and still began to take a further look at this whole fireplace. Not at all. Then I horsed around with that island, just adjusting it a little bit, really adding a whole nother 3 inches up at that end, because that's going to be a lot of traffic in the summer, I anticipate. So I widened this space up here. Okay, cursor wasn't working. I'm talking about the chimney right here in this little piece. Then I pulled this, then I started just ignoring this. For one thing, this is 8 feet wide here, so there's a lot of stone facing this, and it's not, it's going to be kind of dark, that stone work, particularly with the dark cabinets. So I started pulling that back some to get it back from this coffee bar and give it its own thing and forget about the alignment through here. And adjusted these windows apparently. Yeah, adjusted these windows These are now all double hungs. These 4 are double hung windows up here. And we'll talk more about these windows yet, obviously. And then apparently I began to think about this dog door. And having a dog door through this door, and then you have to have another one through this storm door, where there has to be some arrangement made that way. And since I've worked with these a lot of times, it seems to me that this dog door, particularly, you don't have even if it were a large dog, it would still fit somewhere up here. Some of these are pretty expensive, but some are not. So it's actually a lot easier to put this right through the wall, depending on what kind of pets you have. These are these super energy efficient ones. I imagine that's why they're $400. I'm just going to look at these middle ones. Yeah, you can see even the medium is still only 7 1/4 wide, and the large, so you have to get all the way up to the super large before it even gets wider than the space between a couple studs at 16 inches on center. So I think you should just put a dog door in there, frankly, because with the storm door and cutting, are you going to cut both doors to get that dog door? So you could put that dog door here, as I think I might have mentioned that before I went over to find them, but it's behind the door there, so I think you could get away with just putting it underneath these windows, possibly right at the center, and it'd be underneath them. But I left it alone for the moment and looked at a few things in the laundry room real quickly, and I will return to that. This is not its final permutation, but I was messing around with this 18-inch deep shelf, and I know you talked about an 8-inch deep shelf, and I had reverted to a 12-inch deep shelf simply because typical brackets and so forth. And I hadn't decided on that 18-inch what's going to happen with that. But then I went on and looked at this elevation out the kitchen window. There's the dog door. I'll bet you that's what I looked at next. No, this is just looking at this whole elevation now. I make the bathroom window smaller and made sure that that meter was far away enough from it. Now from the last plan, I'm showing this sliding window, and it's about 5 feet wide. So this means with these sliding windows, max open, both flanking units open, the maximum opening you're going to have is half of that, so 30 inches wide by 48 inches tall in this case, which is 10 square feet, which is a lot of ventilation regardless. And we will be revisiting these windows, but one of the things I liked about the sliding window was the ventilation was adequate, but it gave you this wider picture window, which worked better with these wide double hungs over here. I also liked that it added further eclecticism to the whole thing, with various different windows going on throughout the plan so far. But generally at this point, and I've had the advantage of seeing it from the outside where you have not, I'm favoring this over the next alternative, which is like triple casements across that. And then this is 3 casements, and those are 20 inches apiece. I'm going to move that up a little bit, and then kind of horse around with the caps on those cabinets up here. These are just things that I had to think about, so you can eventually. And we return to the dog door, centered on that window for a minute. This is truly like find the difference. Or where's Waldo? Oh, okay, there was just fixing up the error with regard to this corner cabinet. And so you have to think about that corner cabinet, and I think I've mentioned this before. Right now I'm showing space for a 39-inch Susan type base. But when this door is open, it's there, so I think the final location of the dog door should be somewhere in this little space here. Showing it here. So he or she has a nice little path through here, regardless of whether people are at this table or not. Now we look at this elevation for a little while. So in looking at this elevation, I put this kind of a hood in for now just to represent something. If you want to send me anything over, I can represent that pretty easily. But I just chose one to demonstrate that we're going to have this wall space up here and this presumably ceramic here, so I wanted to cover that. And this cabinet, let's get this over. That's a blind cabinet right now. Presumably in the future that's a microwave here. But this cabinet here right now is going from the top of a refrigerator, a standard depth refrigerator, and I have it recessed as we talked about. And right now this cabinet is probably 30 inches tall, which is a lot of storage because it's a full 24 inches deep if you need that much storage. So that's something on that wall there. And then we go to this wall here, and this is looking towards your garage. There's a number of things to cover here. Just kind of ignore this here. I was just putting this together. I'll cover that right now. It seems like you'd almost be remiss not to have some sort of water at this coffee bar, since you already got the water going over there to that laundry room. This can drop right down into it. So any kind of water that can be provided. I am lucky enough that my coffee maker is adjacent to my sink. You need water for it, and so I am showing this. I'm also showing here this is a 15 or probably a 15 inch, maybe it's a 15-inch cooler, to if you wanted to have something less cumbersome in the refrigerator to get into from this family room out here, this great room out here. Other things to consider is the baseboard in here. I'll talk about all this right now. Just get it over with. All of these casings that I'm showing and all these baseboards, here's what they've been showing so far. All these window heads are, and I'm thinking that this would be, back in the day we would have done this in poplar and then primed it and painted it. So you can do what you like as far as the material goes. But the sizes on these, and these will be called out in the plans unless you tell me otherwise. All of these lintels up here are 5/4 by 6, 1 inch by 5.5 inch wide, and all the casings are 1x4s. The sills are 1 inch thick. The sills are 5/4 sills, and the apron is a 1x4. The baseboards are 1x6, and then shoe mold. I'm showing standard shoe mold here. You may want to use one of those older school beveled shoe molds, but that's what I'm showing so far. And with regard to that, and all of these doors, everywhere it gets tight, there is going to be this 1 inch paint here, because a lot of these I have the lintel run all the way to the wall to gain as much space as possible. Another thing with this elevation is, notice where these baseboards come around at the end of this wall and return to this cabinet here. These cabinets, depending on what kind of cabinetry it is, and I'm showing this in white because it's easier to see both in elevation and in camera view. It's easier to see what's happening when I represent that as white. So, but at when we get somewhere a little bit further along, I will change everything and be able to show you some photographic views with it dark. But with regard to your cabinetry and interfaces like this, where it's back in an alcove, you need to leave at least 1 inch for this baseboard, for this 1x6 baseboard, which is taller than the shoe, or taller than the toe kick, to return and die against that 1 inch filler, or whatever you want to call it, or some allowance needs to be made for that sort of situation. The reason it's 1x6 instead of like 1x4, which would just turn and go in underneath this, is the height of this room. With regard to the front windows, right now, and this changes a little bit, right now I was showing them with these dimensions so that I could have a 5/4 by 6 lineal out here, lintel or lineal, depending, it's aluminum or vinyl or whatever, but that is represented as a 1 inch lintel outside of 1 by 5.5. However, eventually, because I looked at adding crown to these rooms, this has to drop a little bit. So instead of it being 39 to the sill, it's probably going to end up closer to 37. Hopefully I won't repeat that later in the film. I horsed around with this here. Remember, right here, this is open up here at the top, where you can put stuff up on top of this closet here. And I horsed around with putting, this is just a 4-inch high soffit here without the plywood and molding on top. I didn't like that, and we'll get to that a little later. And at the time I did that, I was looking for alignment with that closet out in the front hall and with these 6'8" door heads and their lintels. But in elevation view, it looks like it matters, but in real life, you're not going to see it like this. So that's less important. Actually, there are a few more things on this elevation, and I'm going to cover those, and then I'm just going to get this film compiled and uploaded and over to you. This will keep this information in more manageable bits, because there's still quite a few slides that cover a whole bunch of different items. But this will cover the rest of this elevation, and then let you think about that while I'm compiling the next film, and that'll be over before you finish thinking about this one. First of all, there's, these films are not in order, because as I recall, we had moved this further back than it is. But this little piece here, I knew that you're going to have enough space here for that baseboard to return, as I said, and to get, hopefully, this one here, you can see I'm showing that as a 17-inch cabinet, which is not standard. So I believe I added enough so that you could do that all, and brought that to 4'0". This discussion continues further, but as I said, I'm just going to cover a few more things on this elevation and then break this film off. That's just a little quick. I wanted to see how small we could get these sinks. This one's only 7 inches. This is not an undermount, but you can get them an undermount. But this one's only 7 inches wide on this here to here. So that will fit in any cabinet. And I had widened that cabinet originally. I started with 12-inch cabinet. You can see it here. But I eventually widened that out to 15-inch wide cabinet in these elevations here. This is 15, 15, and 15. No, it's not. It's 15, 18, and 15 for a total of 48. But here's these windows. I wasn't really keen on this big single one here. For one thing, this is going to open up onto the porch, and the porch is going to become a lot more usable. For one thing, that porch ceiling is going to be the same 9-foot ceiling, which would be kind of nice. At least right now it seems like that is what will happen to me. But with these windows, I wanted to go with something a little bit more. You still get the light in the air. These are little transom units, 1 or 2. I'd add 2, because I knew I didn't want 2 of these. I didn't think you did. And so I added 2 here, and then your furniture's down here, and these ones are up high. As I recall, there's not going to be a whole lot to see uphill here. But one of the things I thought about when these were down here is it seems like there's going to be headlights coming in these windows from that road that comes around. So I went to that and left it at that for now. I'll cover this last little bit before I break it off. And this is with regard to you talked about maybe having some sort of division through here, and I like that too. And I also like the idea that maybe it can provide some sort of plenum type thing for the HVAC. It's just a sculptural aspect of it, so I began to endeavor to see what I could do with that, with this line representing a soffit where you pass under here. At that point I was really starting to get into this whole idea of this thing through here, which isn't as valid when it's not in elevation form. But doing this, putting this soffit across like that, and then moved the fireplace back so that the fireplace stone would die up underneath that, and there would be a jog in your molding here. This would not align with this hall, and we don't have the space to pull that hall over to make it align, to force this. And I'm not sure that's what you will end up with anyway. We will look at that in some of these photographic representations before it's said and done. But that's what I'm showing there. And I started really liking this, but again, this is an elevation view, and it's a different thing. Right? We'll show this again before this is all over. And a couple more things. For one thing, eventually you'll be having to think about how high you want this rod in that laundry room. Normally it's 80 inches, which is 6'10", so I'm showing it 4 inches above that, just so that this clothing doesn't get in the way of the folding table here. And this was that this is that soffit coming through, and again, this is elevation view, which is kind of not that critical in this application, but it's, you know, hiding those window heads. But it's interesting how it changes the shape of that fireplace, that chimney. I messed around with making that soffit a little bit shorter, halfway between the hallway ceiling and this ceiling. I really didn't like it in photographic view, but we will return to it eventually. When I come back with the next film, 10B, I guess we'll be picking up with some of this laundry room discussion. We actually don't, for what I've put together now, we don't have that much more to go, but it seems like there's going to be a lot of information in that group of slides. So I will leave it for that for now, and you'll have probably both of these films at the same time, but they'll be more manageable maybe. So that is it for now. I'll talk to you in the next film. Thanks.